And then very quickly, before I pass it on to the panelists, I wanted to introduce them. So Vince is a Calgary-based instructional coach, curriculum content developer, and author who specializes in working with teachers, leadership teams, schools, and school districts, implementing high-impact strategies and systems. Sarah is a former teacher with the Edmonton Catholic School Division. She was the division's first equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism consultant. Sarah is currently the manager of education and outreach for the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. Tim has over 30 years of experience as a classroom teacher, assistant principal, and superintendent. He currently serves as the Dean of Education of Concordia University of Edmonton. And finally, Wayne. Wayne is the teacher of student teaching, is the director of student teaching at the University of Winnipeg. He spent 32 years as a teacher and school leader, and Wayne is a citizen of the Red River Métis. And with that, I welcome everyone, and I'll pass it on to our panel.
All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good early afternoon if you're coming to us from somewhere else. My name is Vince. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to represent the four of us who are going to take you through what we affectionately call a toolkit for navigating the first years. And I think it's imperative for us to just talk a little bit about what you're expecting to see today. So each of us is going to play a part in this. I'm going to act kind of as the facilitator, and I will also talk a little bit about planning and lesson design. My colleague Wayne will be taking us through the learning environment. My colleague and co-author Sarah will be taking us through well-being and balance. And my colleague and co-author, because we're all colleagues and co-author, Tim, will be taking us through the first days. And all of the content that we're going to be talking about today is kind of cherry-picked from a resource that we created essentially from the standpoint of all of the things we wish we had at our disposal when we first started in the classroom. You will notice that there is a generational representation here of different facets of experience, levels of experience, years of experience, and we kind of smashed our brains together in writing this resource with the intention of what are all the things that we wish we had? And what that turned out to be was a book that we called Navigating the First Years. And Navigating the First Years, the reason we call it a toolkit is because we kind of sectioned the book into specific areas, specific tools. And there's don't look into this image too much. There's no rhyme or reason why certain tags are placed around certain tools. But I want you to know that as you look at the screen here, these are the areas that we focus on in navigating the first years. Everything ranging from equity and culturally responsive practices all the way to assessment. Now, we could sit here all day and talk about all the various toolkit tactics that are embedded within each one of these chapters. However, we would be here for multiple hours, and that's not the point. The point is just to kind of figure out what we can offer, what we have to kind of recommend to help you launch into that new school year. So we are going to take into account a variety of these toolkit tactics from a select few of the chapters. One thing to note when you look, if you have your hands on this book, if you're thinking about getting your hands on this book, is that the book is comprehensive in the sense that it's like 250 pages, but the point is not to read it from cover to cover. The point is to access this resource like a toolkit. Maybe you're running into some places like you may need some support with assessment. So access the toolkit tactics, the 5 or 6 toolkit tactics, little strategy recommendations that are written in 3 to 5 pages that can help kind of launch you there. Maybe you're looking for some suggestions for well-being and balance. And outside of what Sarah's going to talk about today, we have a copious amount of others in there. The goal for today, though, is to give you just enough to feel like we can really get into the school year. Depending on where you're tuning in from, some of you have started your school years already. Maybe you first, I know I have some colleagues of mine who are in Arizona, first day of classes was on Monday. right? Maybe some of you who are some colleagues of us who are coming from Edmonton or from Manitoba, we're probably not starting for a few more weeks. But the goal is just to take the information that we're hearing from today, or that you're hearing from on the recording, and launch into the new school year in hopes that you have the best possible start to continue that great momentum of those first years. So we are going to start with one of the toolkit, or one of the toolkit sections that we like to call the significance of the learning environment.
Thanks, Vince. So if you can just advance to there, you're both the physical space tactic 5.1. And so what I wanted to do is start here just with a quote. As Jessica said, I'm the director of student teaching, so I work with a lot of young aspiring teachers. And this was a quote I had recently: the best part of having my own classroom will be setting it up how I think it will help my students. That is a powerful, powerful thing when you have autonomy as a teacher and you can start making decisions about what your learning environment is actually going to look like for your learners. And so as part of that, if we could advance, there's things I want you to consider. One is I want you to think about curating, or we should encourage our young teachers, our new teachers, curate the walls of your learning space. Add posters and artifacts and other bits that grab attention and spark curiosity and generate questions. You don't have to put everything up at once. You can use the space judiciously and slowly build it out. Put out 3 or 4 different things and ask your students, hey, what do you think we should put up next? And let them choose and let them talk about it and make their learning visible and talk about how this is interesting or that's not interesting. Have a mystery object that you hang on the wall for a little while, all covered up, and give them hints and clues. Draw them in so that they can't wait to get in that classroom and see what's going on. Building anticipation, getting students hungry for the learning is just part of the art and science of teaching. And then as you go along, change it up. Another one is to discover more about your students, tactic 5.2. I take students in northern Manitoba, very in the far, far north of North America, and we do stuff with different schools. This is a quote from one of my students. I had no idea how to make bannock. It's a type of bread, unleavened bread. But the student showed me after school. When we were done, we just sat and ate and laughed. The next day, my class just felt better. These are important things for us with our students, to spend time talking, to allow them to reveal themselves as they feel. Classrooms should be somewhat vulnerable places where people are able to talk about their learning and what they want to do, their aspirations, the things that are important to them. You will have parents who will talk to you, and if you have a nice, warm classroom and you're inviting people in, you'll be able to discover a lot more about your people, and then you'll be able to do a better job teaching them. If we could advance, and so a few things to consider for you is attend or participate in school activities. You don't have to coach everything. You don't have to run everything. But if your students come to you and they say, hey, you know, at lunch we're doing intramurals, go out and cheer for them for 5 minutes. Even if you're there for 10 minutes, you're giving them the inclination or the indication that you care about them more than just as students. If they're going out to volunteer, give up a little time and go with them. You will learn a pile. And if you can coach or direct the musical or work with them on the yearbook, you will have your kids telling you things that will help you indefinitely. So being interested in your students' lives outside of your learning space is really important. And if sometimes I used to go watch our kids play hockey in Canada, and parents were always amazed that a teacher would actually come on their own time. So these are some things to think about as you create your learning environment, getting to know the people and creating a nice space for people to learn in.
So as we move on from the learning environment, which encompasses such a massive part of framing how you're going to be teaching, we wanted to address a little bit of what seems to be moderately overwhelming sometimes, which is this idea of planning and lesson design. And the reason why we spent some time writing about planning and lesson design is because I feel like there's multiple different ways to address how to create a lesson. Depending on where your undergraduate experience, whether your university experiences were, depending on what your student teaching experience was, if you had any, sometimes you're thrust into thinking there's only one way to design a lesson. And we want to offer a different way of conceptualizing it. So rather than thinking about like, this is my lesson plan structure, if you went through like a Madeline Hunter type, or if you went through like an inquiry based, rather than thinking about how we frame those things, we want to think about when we're planning how we're addressing this notion of mastery. And so when we talk about mastery, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot in education, mastery is not necessarily a function of genius or talent. It's a function of how well students can perform against a standard or a curricular objective. I say standard because our American friends in the chat use standards. I say curricular objective because a Canadian, that's what we call our standards. We call them curricular objectives. So don't get that mixed, because I know the word curriculum in the States means something slightly different. So when we think about planning for mastery, when we think about addressing the needs of 30 some students, 25 to 35 students in our classroom, instead of thinking what is the best way for me to deliver my lesson, I want you to start thinking about planning as levels of achievement, or planning through what we call progressions, right? So Toolkit Tactic 4.2 challenges us to conceptualize the delivery of our lesson towards mastery. What you're looking at on the screen is just a sample of what we call depth of knowledge, or DOK. If you're in a DOK, depth of knowledge school district, we know that students can enter the learning at a level 1 and can exit into as a level 4. So what I would challenge you to do is have a look at your existing standards and determine where on this DOK level we are expecting our students to be. And then when we communicate that to our students, we want to communicate it to them. I call it like an exit ramp. At the end of the learning, we should be at this DOK level, not the other way around. Oftentimes we read the standards and we think, okay, I need my students to get there now. I need them to be able to be at that level now. Rather, we should think about it like, let's just use this as an example, okay? Let's say the standard is written that students will be able to justify an argument. So we've identified that the standard is living at a level 3. So how we plan to get to that is by looking downwards. So before they justify an argument, I want them to organize an argument. Well, before they organize an argument, I want them to identify an argument. And we plan into the mastery of justification by looking at, can they identify, can they organize, and then can they justify? And oftentimes this is lost in the communication of our planning, because we're like, why can't my students justify yet? The standard says justify. I need them to justify. Why can't they justify? And it can be a very frustrating experience. I challenge you to think about it this way. So Sherry wrote in the chat that they use DOK in their teacher prep program. That's fantastic. You may use Bloom's taxonomy. Those are similar but different in the sense that Bloom's uses different labels for the progression as DOK, but know that if you associate the verb in the standard to a level, or to a level of Bloom's taxonomy, and then work backwards, it will make planning that much smoother for you. We want to plan for progressions, not plan for accomplishment of the standard right off the bat. So that's the first tactic that I wanted to kind of talk about when it came to planning for mastery. The second is be aware of resources. And here's what I mean by that. I'm very curious if anyone in the chat would like to try to explain this metaphor or take a shot at why I put this on. I would love to see what you wrote. So in looking at this, why would I have selected this as a way to describe resources? I'll give everyone, whoever wants to do that in the chat, I'll give you a second to do that. There we go. So now the chat's popping. They can be overwhelming. There's many more resources than you'll ever be able to use. It can also overwhelm the students. That's right, Dylan. It's a tidal wave of information. It's too many choices. Amy Young, exactly. Sometimes too many choices can be as dangerous as not enough choices, right? So here's the thing. There's so many resources. It's hard, Mary. It is very difficult to discern which ones are more reliable than the others, right? So why I did that is exactly that reason. When I first started teaching, we weren't Google Drive people, we were USB drive people, right? The external USB drive. That was kind of the cutting edge technology. And I remember I had a colleague of mine who said to me, fantastic, you're teaching the course that I taught last year. Here's my USB of everything I taught. You are welcome. There was probably 1,000 files on that USB. So it took me longer to find what I needed than it did. Yeah, back in the day, you used printed materials only, and then you were just gifted a file cabinet full of printed materials. So it's important for us to understand that the lived reality of new teachers is oftentimes you inherit all of these resources, and then you're like, what do I do now? How do I know which ones are good, and how do I know which ones aren't so good? And it leads me to make a very important distinction. And it's almost dinner time here, so I decided to use this metaphor. There are certain resources that are like fast food type of resources, and there are certain resources that are balanced diet resources. And I'm not going to name any specific online paid for platforms, but we tend to internalize this belief that if we pay for it, it's better than what we can find elsewhere for free or make ourselves. And so sometimes when you're so inundated with too many resources, we access something that we want to pay for. I use that as a fast food metaphor. What I mean by this is it's okay in a pinch. It's okay if you're overwhelmed. The last thing you want to do is cook after a long day. So you run through a drive-thru, you pick it up, and it's awesome. What's not awesome is if you do that for every meal for 365 days of the year. You can try it, but I know they made a documentary called Super Size Me back in the early 2000s where it didn't work out so well for Morgan. So if we think of the resources approach, I want you to understand that it's okay to access both, but we shouldn't live exclusively in the fast food realm. This is coming from someone who literally had a quarter pounder for lunch, right? So I was in a pinch, I had a quarter pounder. I can't eat that every day. It's not good for my bank account. It's not good for my health. And it's similar to the resources. Don't go to the same place and pay for something and think it could be better, because I want you to consider these questions when you're presented with a tidal wave of too many resources, or when you are presented with an opportunity to consider, should I pay for this or should I not? What learning goals are you hoping to address with your resource? What already exists within your school district or maybe partner school districts? What's the cost? What sources were cited in the making of this resource? How accurate is the presented information? And is it possible that you could leverage community leaders? Could you leverage mentors in Indigenous communities? Could we leverage elders to support the learning goals that we hope to cover? So when we think of resources, I just want you to know that everything that you wrote is entirely correct. There's a lot. What do we choose? How much time do we want to dedicate to sifting through thousands of files, whether they're paper on a drive or on a USB, and start thinking about, is it going to actually save me time to either create it myself or go to someone I trust and ask these questions? This is a great screen grab for you. Take a screen grab. If you have your camera on your phone, or if you have your phone handy, you want to take a photo of this, please feel free. But just know that this is what we hope. It's okay to access both, but know that you have to have some considerations. And those are the two things I think you should consider as we launch into the school year when it comes to planning and lesson design.
So I have the pleasure of chatting with you folks about well-being and balance and what that looks like as someone who's new to the classroom or new to teaching. And I should preface this by saying anything that's presented on well-being and balance is not an exhaustive list. There are so many things that I probably have not even thought of when it comes to well-being and balance, but it's doing the things that are best for you. The tactic that I pulled from first in the toolkit is 2.1, and we had the pleasure of working with teachers and just asking teachers about their experiences in the classroom and to kind of give us a bit of synopsis or stories from the field. And I really liked this quote, especially the last line. We will not know everything because knowing everything is an impossible task. I taught grades 3 and 4 for a while, and then I jumped up to grades 5 and 6. And so I had by the time I got to the end of my grade 3 career, I thought I knew it all. And then I jumped into a new grade and was suddenly overwhelmed by how many 6th grade resources and 5th grade resources there were. Kind of like Vince mentioned, I was not given a USB drive. I was given garbage bags full of workbooks for grade 6 science here in Alberta, which is vast. But it took me putting my ego aside and putting myself back in the shoes of a learner to understand that I'm not going to know everything, and that's okay. The title of this particular tactic is Once in a While, Leave Work at Work. If you could advance to the next slide, that'd be great. There are lots of things to consider when it comes to leaving work at work. And that's coming from someone who was a chronic be the first one at school, be the last one to leave kind of teacher. I would show up at 7. I would have the photocopier all to myself. I would have the run of the school until about 8 o'clock when my principal got in. And then because at the time I was single and without children, I had the luxury of staying after the bell rang and the buses left. None of that is super healthy, especially in your first few years of teaching, when you're just trying to get your bearings and figure out the lay of the land and what grade you're teaching and the curricular outcomes or the standards that you need to focus on. You can't really be the best version of yourself as an educator for your students if you're not taking care of yourself. And some of the things that are listed there, again, not an exhaustive list, but it's important not to sacrifice sleep when you are starting out. Your students are going to need you to be on the ball and ready for any and all things. And so a tired teacher, as you will figure out soon enough, is pretty much the norm. However, it's important to prioritize rest when you need it and to take those days, if you need them, to rejuvenate, because you can't do anything for your students if you're not well and taking good care of yourself. If you're planning to bring things home, be realistic about it. I was the teacher that would bring home piles and piles of marking, only to have them sit in the car because I was too tired when I got home at 8. Be realistic about what it is that you might be able to accomplish in an evening. And while I'm at it, set a timer. Don't expect yourself to work until midnight. Perhaps give yourself 30 more minutes of work at home if you need to. The reason for that is your brain needs to rejuvenate and your brain needs time to rest as well, just as your body does. Just as we wouldn't expect our students to go home and do 6 more hours of schoolwork or homework, well, at least I hope we wouldn't expect that of our students. We need to be realistic about the time that we're putting in for ourselves so that our bodies can get that rest as well. And as I mentioned before, only bring home what's manageable. It's unnecessary to fill up a bag full of things to mark. That work will always be there, and that's okay. It's all right to be able to leave some of it at school. The second tactic that I pulled from is incorporate your passions. And I think this leans more on the balance side of well-being and balance. I love this tactic and the tools that are in it. It's 2.4 in the book if you have it with you. And Dr. Bishop coined this notion of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And that to me is the end all be all of incorporating your passions when it comes to education. We want our students to be well-rounded, but we ourselves need to be well-rounded in order to present that to our students. And the representation that comes out within this tactic is something that's really, I think, eye-opening and important to share with you. So I'd love to be able to talk just a little bit about windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. I'm going to give you some examples. I know you can see and read the chart that's on the screen, so I'll give you some examples to kind of placehold those. A window, let me start with mirror. So mirror is the reflection or the representation of yourself. You see yourself represented. And with my students, I worked at a very, very diverse school. And so one of the things that we all could get behind is food. And so the mirror experience for me would be talking about food from my own country where my ancestry is from, which is Ghana in West Africa. Um, one of the most prominent dishes from there is jollof rice. It's something that's very popular amongst lots of West African nations, and there's lots of arguments about who does it better. I'm still going to say Ghana because that's where I'm from. But in order for me to experience a Ghanaian dish, that's something that I'm used to, something that represents me and the place that I'm from. A window is perhaps engaging with a perspective or identity, or in this case, a food that maybe is a little bit different. So although I'm not Japanese, love sushi. So the ability to go and try sushi, go have food at a Japanese restaurant, visit Japan and have something authentically made, connect with Japanese folks in my city and learn how to maybe say key phrases like hello and thank you in Japanese when I receive the food is what I would consider a window experience. I'm getting just a glimpse into a different culture through a medium that's not something that I necessarily know a whole lot about, but am engaged in. A sliding glass door is an experience or a food perhaps that you need a little bit more clarity on. So if I'm again thinking about food and like Vince, it's close to supper time here. Maybe that's why I'm leaning on food. But sliding glass door for me would be something like empanadas. There's so many different types globally, but where did it originate? What types of fillings are there, depending on what country you're in? Who makes the best ones, which can be argued kind of like the jollof rice. So I think it's important that as we bring these experiences and talk about balance with our students, we're bringing them these different types of experiences. But not only are we bringing them to our students, we're experiencing them ourselves. We're making sure that in order for us to utilize and bring our passions into the classroom, we're doing so holistically so that when we do that with our students, we can seek that balance. We can bring that balance and new perspectives into the classroom for all of our students to experience alongside us.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. And again, very exciting time of year. You're starting in a new school, perhaps new classroom, new grade level. And I remember when I got my first assignment, I was living in Eastern Canada and I had to move over 2,500 miles away from home to a rural remote community in Northern Alberta. I felt excited. I felt nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I was looking forward to what would unfold, which ended up being 32 years in working in K to 12. So like we put that first foot forward and start this adventure. And so your first few days of teaching and learning are really an opportunity for you to get to know your school and the community in which your school is situated. And for some of you, you might be moving away from home. You're leaving behind what's comfortable, what's familiar, what's known, and you're taking that big step forward. And as I said, you can feel a little bit lonely sometimes. And so this is why the tactic 3.1 is knowing your school and school district really starts to situate you to the things you're going to need to know, the people who are going to help you, and hopefully to help you feel the beginnings of a connection, of maybe putting down some roots in a school community where you will not only survive, you will thrive, you will flourish, you will grow. And so what are some of the things we need to really consider? Let's take a look. And so as funny as it sounds, sometimes you have to practice the commute. You have to get from your house or your apartment, point A to point B. And sometimes there might be only one way to go. I know for me, sometimes when I'm commuting, the 7:30 a.m. freight train always kind of closes down traffic for 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes it stops, sometimes it backs up, sometimes it takes more than 15 to 20 minutes. And the next thing you know, you're panicking because, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late and I need to be there on time. And I don't want to set that example of, people think I'm late. And so have an alternative route. Is there a different way you can get there? Maybe there's transit. So maybe you can carpool. You're going to meet somebody on staff and say, hey, let's swap up. I'll drive a couple of days a week. You drive the other days a week. The other thing that was really important when I moved to this rural town in northern Alberta, I would walk about the community. So I'd stop into the local corner store and chat up the clerks, get to know them by their first names. Stop by the barber shop. As you can see, my lovely hair here, I have to be very stylish. So you want to kind of know, like, who is the doctor? Where is the dentist? Like, what resources are around me that I can access? And so is there a community league? Are there sports teams? So kind of get a sense of the flavor of the town, the spirit of the town or the community in which you are going to be serving as a teacher. So really important to make that connection, not just to the school, but to the community itself. Of course, there are the go-to people. And for me, it was the admin support, so that the school secretary staff, as well as the custodian. I'm showing up with some boxes. I have my books, my materials. I want to set up my classroom. And so those are kind of the first go-to people that you will meet. It's typically maybe not the principal or assistant principal. It's other key workers within the school who are really going to be there to help you figure things out and find your way. Now, one thing that you can do if you haven't started the school year yet is you have access to the school's website or the school district's website. You can look it up. You can do a little bit of research. What is the mission and the vision of the school? What are the resources? What are the rules and expectations? How do we do attendance? What does field trips look like? So you can look at all of these aspects that you're going to have to know. But you can preload a lot of those before you even step foot in the door by really getting a sense of your school community, that virtual footprint. And so that's why the website can be really super helpful in helping you become familiarized with the community before you even get there. And in the book, Tactic 2.2 takes you deeper into some of the policies, whether that's behavior, again, whether that's attendance or emergency responses, all the different drills, etc., that you're going to have to become familiar with. So it's a good place just to start doing a little bit of reading, chip away at that. I love Sarah's comment in terms of that balance, and sometimes, you're working on laundry. Okay, you've got some laundry, load up the washing machine, read a couple of things on the web page. Laundry's done in the washer, put it in the dryer, read a little bit more, mark a paper, do those things in between. But ultimately, consider the questions that you might have for your mentor teacher, for the principal. Embrace your new community with a spirit of curiosity. And sometimes if we're feeling a little bit lonely or we're far from home or we haven't met the key people yet, go in with that spirit of it's okay to ask questions. I'm looking forward to figuring things out and finding my way. And I know there will be people who want to help me because somebody hired me to be at this school. So that's the exciting part. You are wanted, you are needed, and we're excited that you're going to be at the school that you are at. Let's take a look at our next tactic. So I talked a little bit already about the admin support, could be the secretary, could be one of the clerks that work at the school nurse, somebody, the custodian especially. But who are the other people that you might need to know? And so I mentioned the word mentor. So you very likely will have a teacher who is going to work with you. They're going to take you under their wing. They're going to show you the landscape. They're going to walk you around the school, perhaps. They're going to show you where to find key resources. They're kind of your go-to person in terms of if you have a question, if you're wondering, how do we do things here? Tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. So this is someone that you're going to come to trust and to respect and work alongside to help get you off to that solid start at your new school. And here's a few other things that we're really recommending. You are not alone. So introduce yourself, smile, just try to be yourself. Okay, don't pretend you have to be something else. I better present myself this way, or I should try to, polish up and look something different that you're not. Okay, be authentically yourself. Let people see your personality shine through. Be vulnerable and open, but ultimately introduce yourself. Visit the common areas, and it might seem uncomfortable. I mean, we do this with our students. We see that, little Timmy is having a hard time fitting in with his peer group. Hey, can we introduce him to a friend? Hey, you're going to sit down with Bobby and Sally, and they're going to be your friends for lunchtime, and they're going to help take you around and show you the playground, etc. Well, very similarly, we want you to connect with some teachers. We want you to be present in the staff room and make those friends. And sometimes it's hard for us to come out of our shell, but we have to take that risk. We have to open ourselves up. And as I said, be vulnerable. Now, I know Wayne touched on this about going to sports and seeing the students and their spaces and making those connections with families. So you can be involved in different committees. So sometimes there's like a wellness committee. Sometimes there's a social committee planning fun activities for staff. There's student clubs. There's different opportunities for you to bring your skills, your strengths, your area of passion and inquiry into the classroom, into the school. For me, I was a big fan of softball, and one of my first schools I was at didn't have softball team, slow pitch. And so I offered to start a slow pitch team, and that took root, that got off the ground. I got to do something I really enjoyed, but also brought kids into it and got them excited about it as well. Gave me a chance to connect with kids on a different level outside of the classroom as well. But again, to Sarah's point, balance. You can't do it all. Your principal may have some ideas of things she or he would like you to do. So you always have to look at those pieces as well. Informal and formal gatherings. There's going to be staff meetings. You need to be present. You need to be engaged. You need to listen. You need to focus on what's happening. If you're ever stuck, go to your go-to friend that you met in the staff room or your mentor teacher and say, can you explain that to me? I didn't quite get that. Or make sure that you are, again, engaging in that school mission, vision, the things that you need to be really focused on for the success, your success in the school. Informal gatherings. Did people go for wings on a Wednesday? Did they go out for a beverage on a Friday after work? Doesn't mean you have to do this all the time, but maybe once in a while. And you'll find your way. You'll find that person that takes you under their wing and helps give you the lay of the land and help you really be connected and start feeling connected and attached. For me, it was a teacher who had been there for 5 years already, and he was fantastic in connecting me to people in the community. He got me involved with the volunteer fire department of all things. So I got to do things that I didn't think I'd ever get to do. I learned how to play golf. I learned how to do curling. So because I committed myself to that community and got invested and involved. And by making those connections on a wider scale, it really helped me to get to know my students much better too. I got to know their parents. I got to know where they live, what they liked, what they enjoyed, what they did on the weekend. And that's the power of informal gatherings. Maybe it's a community barbecue. Maybe it's a fair, a county fair, whatever it is. Ultimately, though, we want to get back into the teaching and learning. And I know Wayne and Vince have shared some really great ideas here in terms of pointing yourself towards that teaching and learning. But it's your mentor. It's a mentor teacher. And if you haven't been assigned a mentor, if there isn't sort of a formal go-to person, that's a great question to ask when you get there. Ask your principal, hey, I'm new. Is there somebody that you have planned for me that I could connect with and sit down with and who I can tag along with and find out what I want to do? So meeting your mentor is huge. And we have a whole tool for that, tactic 3.4. And so you can read more about that, about how to really get things going well with your mentor, because you're going to be like a fine pairing, a nice wine and cheese. You're going to dance together and move together through the school year, learning and growing from and with each other. So again, take a deep breath. You're going to be off to a great start. And we just have just great hopes and wishes for you as you move into this new school year.
Awesome. So as we kind of round things off here and we keep with this theme of launching into the new school year, I think it's important to talk about some of the realities of being a new teacher. And I know, just judging from some of the comments on here, maybe you're not new first year, but you're newer to the profession. I think it's important to know that one of the things that we have talked about outside of this webinar is this notion of thriving by year 5. We've written a few blogs about thriving by year 5, and there's a lot of pressure that we place on ourselves in the first few years to be great. Coming out of the blocks being, we're going to be the best teacher we've ever been in year 1, in month 1, right? Week 1. And in many ways, launching into the school year is also about tempering the expectations of knowing that it takes a little bit of time to build into being a really awesome teacher. It takes about 5 years for us to grow into that. And so launching into the school year is not just about us saying, you need to be able to know how to use all of these tools right off the bat. As a matter of fact, launching into the school year is more about, what do I need to know a little bit more, or where do I need to learn a little bit about the first days, or where do I need to sharpen my skills at instructional practices? Because you need to give yourself grace. This is one of the most noble professions that we have. It is also equally challenging. I don't want to sugarcoat it and say it's always going to be the best day of your life, but part of launching into the new school year is having the expectations and knowing when we need to press into those well-being practices, when we need to just take a night off, when we need to seek out someone who's not just our neighbor classroom person, because this can be an ironically lonely profession at times, in the sense that we are in front of 30 children for 6 hours a day, but we are the only adult in the room, or can be the only adult in the room. So find a person, find a place where you can just unplug. And for me, that was in the drama department. I did not do one course of drama my entire K through 12 year, and I didn't do any drama. I wasn't a drama person. I was, believe it or not, somewhat athletic. And it took a mentor to tell me, why don't you go check out what's going on in the theater on your prep? You don't have to do anything. Just go introduce yourself to Vern, who's the drama teacher, and say hello and get to know it. And you know what? It changed my entire perspective of how I taught. I got to see students authentically as themselves. So I did some of what Wayne was talking about, the who before you do. I got to learn a little bit about how the learning environment frames the way we teach, because a drama room is not, or was not, my history room. So I got to learn a little bit more about the significance of the learning environment. Vern taught me about determining good versus not great drama productions, and I got to see what made great drama productions and not great ones. So leveraging resources, and more importantly, or maybe most importantly, I found calm in a very busy school. I found my well-being and balance. There are pockets of that exists at your site, and it may take a little bit of you wanting to maybe get over that anxiety of, should I ask that person? If you don't want to walk up to someone and say, hey, can you be my mentor? I really like you. If that's a little bit too much for you, then ask a question that might say like, hey, can I just ask you a couple questions about, like, how did you do that? Or I saw this thing that you did. It was awesome. I've never seen that before. Start the school year with a committed action. And so we're going to round this all off with one last chat participation, which the question I've just posted in there, which is, what might be one committed action that you can do to help you launch into the new school year? Whether it's something you saw today or something that you've already done, but what might be one committed action that could help you launch into the new school year? My committed action is filling my own cup before I fill the cup of others. I want to fill my cup so it overflows, and I'll pass it over to my other co-authors and panelists to share their committed action while you populate the chat. So Wayne, I see you're unmuted. Why don't you go, Wayne? What is your committed action for this school year?
My committed action for this school is really interesting you asked, because I was just talking about this today. And it is really getting out there and talking to my students and making sure that they know who I am and that I'm available to them and that I want them to succeed. And this is at a university level, but for me, it's all about being, as universities can be incredibly difficult places to see people. So I am actually going to be looking for a spot at the university where I can go just hang out and be available for students to come find me instead of trying to find me in my office.
Awesome. Thank you. Sarah, if you are ready with your committed action, and then we'll go to Tim and then we'll wrap things up.
For sure. I think for me, working from home for a national museum here in Canada, one of the things that I need to prioritize is balance and knowing that I need to shut down my computer at a reasonable hour and go outside, go to the gym, go meet with my family and visit folks. And although I spoke a lot about balance, I find that I don't practice what I preach all that often. So I think for myself, I need to focus a little bit more on the balance side of things.
Awesome. And Tim.
Yeah, for me, I'm really committed to finding out just something fun, something unique about my colleagues, my coworkers, just something beyond the classroom context. And not that I'm prying into their lives, but I want to know, say, I know your mom wasn't feeling well. How's she feeling today? Or I know you had a little vacation getaway. How was it? What's something that you learned? What's something that fun that you did? So really, it's kind of showing them more about who I am and learning more about who they are. And I think that goes a long way just to making those informal connections. That feels more like home. That feels more like community. And that's what I really want you to feel, is you're connected to your school and your community in the most positive ways possible.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, team. Thanks for everyone in the chat if you haven't been following the chat, you may want to scroll up. There's some really brilliant committed actions in there. As we come to an end, before we say our official goodbye and our official thank you, just know that we're so grateful for you and everything that you've done, but also know that if a few things that we mentioned kind of resonated with you in this short 50 minutes, we have us four, as you can see by these expertly crafted ChatGPT avatars. Us four are conducting what we're calling a Foundations and Futures Institute through Corwin, which is an opportunity for mentors and new teachers to attend an institute that will differentiate a pathway for each of you. So we will have some sessions for mentors, we will have some sessions for new teachers, and if that's something you may be intrigued about or interested about, that QR code should work. I tested it myself. That's not saying much technologically, but it does work. We are so thankful that you took time out of your day to listen to the four of us talk a little bit about launching into the school year, a little bit about navigating the first years. And if there's anything that you guys need whatsoever, please do not hesitate to find us. We're all available on the Corwin website if you want to track us down. And I'm going to turn it over to Olivia to talk a little bit about the winners.
All right, and if you have any questions that didn't get answered today by one of our authors, if anything occurs to you later, feel free to send those to us at info@corwin.com and we will forward them along. And thank you again to all of our wonderful presenters. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, and have a great rest of your week.